Joe, can you hear us?
Checking.
Yes, I can.
Okay, your father's going to start.
Rabbi Yadin Semsha, this is the year. Members of Torah Or and friends. Most of you know me as my friend, but once again want to take the opportunity to welcome all of you this morning to our annual Yom Iyun, which is a special learning session to commemorate the yahrzeit of my late wife Evelyn, who was nifta 8 years ago. This event will be the first of a season laden with many events and activities. To be honest with you, I was very concerned regarding the turnout this morning, since this is the program that begins the season. However, once the reservations started to come in, I realized that we all have been waiting for our season to begin, so now let's begin. I have no doubt at this time that almost all of our minds are preoccupied with what is happening in Eretz Israel. All of us are reciting Tehillim as well as other tefillos. However, I feel it would be appropriate before we begin our program that we say a Mishabera for the soldiers of the IDF, as well as a prayer for the release of the hostages. If you don't mind, please rise. Prayer for the IDF. Mishabera Havasein Avovis of Yaakov Yorech et Chayolei Tzvo Haganol Yisrael. V'yam Sheikh Hofes Habitachon Ho'omdim Al Mishmar Atzeinu B'orei Eloheinu Migbul Halvalon V'al Midbar Mitzrayim ובכל מקום שהם ויבשה בו אוויר ים היינו ניגופים לפניהם הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמע ויתלס חיילינו מכל טוב וציפו מכל מעשה ידיהם יד בשונאינו תחתיהם ויתרם בחסד ישוע ובטרף לצפון יקוים בהם הפסוק כי אדוני אלוהיכם ההולך עמכם להילחם לכם עם אויביכם להושיע אתכם ונאמר אמן. Now to pray for the hostages. מי שברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב יוסף משה ואהרון דוד ושלמה יברך וישמור ויצרף נדרין צבא אדוני לישראל ושבוייו. את כל אחינו הנצורים בצלם ובשוויו בעבור שכל הקול הקודש הזה מספלל בעבורם הקדוש ברוך הוא ימלא רחמים עליהם ויוציא בחושך וצלמובס ומוסרותיהם ינתק וממצוקותיהם יושיעם ושיבי מהירו לחיק משפחותיהם. יודו לאדוני חסדו ונפלאותיו לבני אדם וכולם בהם מכך שכתוב ופדויי אדוני ישובון ובאו ציון ברינו ושמחת עולם על ראשם וספקו ושמחו ישיגו ונוסו יוגו ואנוכו ונאמר אמן. Before we start our program, I want to give a special thanks to Andrea, our office tech specialist, who has given much of her time to advertise this event and to train our friend Willie Hotbaum to set up the Zoom part of our program. I want to give a thanks to my friend Harriet Brick, who has been a big help in planning and the execution of this program, and to Arlene Strauss and Jill Meltzer, who gave us a big hand when necessary. At this point, I would like to turn over the program to two members of my family. First, to my son, Joe, who will bring back memories about his mother and on Zoom. This will be followed by my daughter, Connie Dennis, who will have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker. Please remember, the refreshments are here, and they will be waiting for you after the completion of the program. So now let's begin. Joe, you're on.
Thank you, Dad. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak once again to commemorate my mother's yahrzeit, Imi Morasi Chayalei Basar Avaron Aleha Shalom, which occurred this past Thursday, Chafei Cheshvan. Unfortunately, I haven't been zocheh to return to Eretz Yisrael since my mother passed away 8 years ago. My wife and I actually intended to travel to Israel this past week to visit our daughters who are studying in Eretz Yisrael this year. But unfortunately, circumstances didn't permit us to travel to Israel on a vacation at this time. May Hashem protect Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, and in specific our Chayalim and hostages, about whom the entire world has completely forgotten, but we haven't forgotten. In any event, my daughters asked me if they could travel to daven by Grandma's kever on her yort site in my stead. Our babies were 10 years old when my mother passed away, and they never had the chance to visit the cemetery previously. I really was touched by their request, and I was truly excited by the opportunity, as my mother loved her to almost and would have been so proud of how they have grown and how they've matured. So I spoke to my girls on the way back from the cemetery, and they truly appreciated the opportunity to visit and to daven by my mother's Zion. But they were confused why my mother's gravestone was covered by nearly 1,000 rocks. So let me paint a picture. Israeli tombstones don't look like American tombstones. In America, we usually have a tall, upright headstone, whereas Israel has a horizontal monument. It looks more like a coffin. With all these stones sitting on top of the monument, my mother's matzeva looks more like a rock quarry rather than a matzeva. So what's with the stones? So to answer this question, I repeated to them a beautiful idea that I actually heard from Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg, who explained why Hashem in Parsha Shoftim prohibits the use of a matzeva for korbanos. V'lo sakim lecha matzeva asher sanei Hashem elokecha. The Torah tells us, do not erect for yourself a stone pillar, which Hashem despises. So Rashi explains that a matzeva is an even achas, one solid stone upon which a korban is brought. Afilu l'shamayim, Hashem despises the matzeva, even if the korbanos are brought for the sake of Hashem. Rather, mizbach avanim u'mizbach adamot tziva lasos ve'zu sanei. A mizbeach made up of numerous rocks is fine, explains Rashi. No problem. But a matzeva, an altar composed of a single solid stone, is detestable to Hashem. Why would Hashem care how a mizbeach is constructed? What would it make a difference if it was made out of one stone or many stones? And by the way, Hashem used to love matzevos. The Avos all brought korbanos on matzevos. And now Hashem hates them? I didn't know that Hashem's so finicky. He used to like matzevos, his taste changed, now it's only a mizbeach. It's really hard to understand this mitzvah. So Rabbi Goldberg quoted an incredible insight by Rabbi Moshe Feinstein in Dras Moshe. Asks Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, what's the difference between a mizbeach and a matzeva? So a mizbeach is constructed from separate stones. You put them together, you pile them up, and you create an altar. What's a matzeva? A matzeva is a single solid stone that serves as a monument. It can't get any bigger. So what's the difference if you bring a korban on a mizbeach or a matzeva? So Ramosha explains that before Matan Torah, Hashem really didn't expect that much from us. Hashem was happy if you took upon yourself a good deed or two and you called it a day. I'm going to be a good person. That's enough. You don't need to daven, no need to do chesed. One good deed, more than enough. Genuk. You're stopped. You're fixed in your ways. You're like a matzeva, a monument. You're one piece of stone. You're set in place. You're not going anywhere. You don't grow and you don't change. But that was before Matan Torah. Once Hashem gave us the Torah, so much more is expected from us. The Torah teaches us what's good, what's right, how to live a meaningful life, how to live a productive life, what's moral, and what Hashem prescribes for us, which is what? Lilmod v'lilamed lishmor v'lasos, to learn and to constantly grow, to progress, to improve, to advance. Don't be complacent. Don't be stuck. A Jew has to constantly be growing and constantly adding. We need to be like a mizbeach that's made up of so many stones and is constantly growing. The potential is always there. So the image of a matzeva is one piece of stone. It's still, it's stagnant, it's fixed. A mizbeach is a picture of stones piled one on top of the other, and it could constantly get bigger and stronger. You could continue to add more. And that's the mandate of a Jew, to constantly grow, to learn continually, to add mitzvos to your avoda each and every day of your life. Hashem doesn't want a Jew to be stagnant or fixed in his ways. Hashem despises that attitude that says, I'm done, I learned enough, I gave enough tzedakah, more than enough that I go to chakras in the morning. You also want me to go to mincha and mariv? No, Hashem actually wants and expects a lot more for us. We need to constantly exceed expectations and continue to learn and advance. So ironically, the Hebrew word for a gravestone, a tombstone, is a matzeva. Why? Very simple. Because when that heavenly buzzer sounds, the game's over. You know, a half-court swish that's 0.1 seconds late doesn't count. When a person dies, he's done. His record's fixed. There's no more mitzvos that he could perform. There's no more chasadim that he could undertake. There is nothing that he could do to change his standing. Now, hopefully, the matzeva is going to tell the legacy of that person's accomplishment and the differences that they made in this world. But they're still done. They're fixed. Nothing is going to change from this point onward. So a person in life should not act like a matzeva while he's alive. A matzeva is for someone after 120 years when they can't learn, when they can't advance. And while we're alive, though, we have to be a mizbeach. We have to constantly be adding stones, building, growing, improving ourselves. So the Torah tells us, lo sakim lecha matzeva. Don't live a matzeva type of life. A life where your religious observance was basically frozen in 12th grade. The way you davened in elementary school is probably the same way you daven when you're 60, when you're 70, or even older. And your ability to learn probably hasn't even changed that much during that entire time. That person is living a matzeva life, and Hashem does not appreciate that. A Jew has to be a mizbeach, and that's what Hashem wants from us. And that's how my mother lived her life. She led a mizbeach life, constantly wanting to learn, to grow, to challenge herself to do more for herself and for others. Funny story, when in the early years of her illness, my mother used to drive for Bikur Cholim. And I used to laugh and tell her that her condition was probably more serious and challenging than most of the people that she drove. But she didn't care because she was still able to drive, and therefore she used that gift to help others. A story I always repeat about my mother. Towards the end of her life, she could barely speak. But when she was at our Shabbos table, when she heard a Devar Torah, she forced herself. She chimed in. She had to express what was on her mind, ask questions, probe, and to understand what was being discussed. Now, she was barely audible, and I was embarrassed because I had a very difficult time understanding what my mother was saying. But she insisted on participating. She was a mizbeach, always growing, never complacent, never stagnant. And with her illness, it would have been all too easy and probably even understandable if she chose to go in a corner and hide from life. But she refused to surrender and live a life of complacency, stagnation, non-growth. Let's go back to our original question. Why do we put stones on a matzeva every time we visit the cemetery? So the matzeva testifies to the accomplishments of the deceased. They're fixed. But while their legacy may be fixed, we testify with each and every stone that we add on top of that matzeva that we will continue to grow and build on that legacy. We essentially build a mizbeach out of the matzeva. That matzeva now becomes the foundation for the Mizbeach that we're going to continue to build through our Torah and our mitzvos. My mother can't build any further, but I'm going to build further for her. I'm going to continue to add to her legacy. I'm going to continue to grow on her behalf. Rabbi Goldberg pointed out fascinatingly that a stone in Hebrew is called an even, and an even is an acronym for Av, Ben, Neched, parent, child, grandchild. When we place a stone on the matzeva, we're attesting to the chain that continues to connect all three generations. A stone is a sign of continuity. When we put that stone on the matzeva, we say that the matzeva is the legacy, but I'm going to continue to build and add to their legacy. I'm going to make a mizbeach out of this matzeva. And that's why my mother's matzeva looks like a rock quarry, because her children, her grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren, Kanai Nahara, continue to build upon the legacy that my mother left us, which is to grow and constantly push to improve ourselves and to better the world in which we live. Well, I think I exceeded the time limit that my father allotted me. I really would be remiss if I didn't attribute equal praise to my dear father. May he live and be well. Admei Avesrim Shana. I've never met anyone who works harder for the tzibur than my father. He's going to be celebrating his 96th birthday in a few months, God willing. He's taken that gift of good health with which he's been blessed by Hashem, and he devotes every moment and every ounce of energy to help this Torah community grow. Today's program is just one of the numerous programs and projects that he spearheads and runs throughout the year. I don't have to tell you. My father's constantly prodding people to get involved, to join the learning, join davening, contribute to this cause. He's the ultimate Mizbeach Jew, never slowing down, never passing the responsibility to the next person, always doing, always learning, always pushing himself and others to elevate their service to Hashem and to their fellow Jew. That's the Mizbeach, which Hashem cherishes and loves dearly. So, Dad, may Hashem continue to bless you with good health and many wonderful years to come, so that you could continue working on his behalf for this tzibur to build this community into a true Torah center, a paradigm of chesed. That's the ultimate Mizbeach, and that's what gives Hashem tremendous nachas ruach. We love you and are really inspired by your living legacy that you demonstrate for us each and every day. So thank you for allowing me to share this time together with everyone. May this program be a zechus for my mother's neshama, and may my father continue to badger each and every one of you to keep on striving to be a Mizbeach Jew. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the program.
I'm going to use this advantage, being in between Joe and Mrs. Tanner. But it is a great pleasure that I introduce Mrs. Orly Tanner to be today's featured speaker. It can't be coincidence that my dad chose you, Orly, to speak today on my mom's 8th yard site, because you were the one he chose to speak on her first one. And it's hard to believe it's been so many years that she's gone. But as my brother told you, the legacy really lives on. Can you hear me now? Yeah. You want me to tell you all over again? Orally, your personal and professional history is quite extraordinary. Daughter of the famous Rabbi Alexander Gross, founder of the Hebrew Academy, you have taken his legacy to new heights. As the former principal of the Yeshiva High School, the Katz Yeshiva High School here in Boca Raton, you have educated hundreds of girls, my own daughters included. Sorry, I'm getting a little sad. And you have served as a role model for them on a continued basis. So it is no wonder that you are often asked to speak both locally, nationally, and internationally. My mom was a huge fan of Orly. She admired you for your elegance, for your eloquence, for your shared love of shopping at Loman's, and of course, for your brilliance. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming my friend, I forgot to mention that, Orly Cannon.
After the beautiful Dvar Torah from Joe, you really don't need me. I think we've all heard enough. We can go home or at least enjoy those refreshments now. But in Hashem, the neshama of Evelyn, of Chayalea should have, the in Hashem, this year should also be not only in her memory, but in the schus that our Chayalim and our hostages come back to their families quickly and safely. We have witnessed, we have seen in the past month, we have heard of evil, of savagery, of brutality, the likes of which I certainly have never experienced, and I believe that most of us have never seen in our lifetime. And of course, we know that we cannot ask why, because Hanistarot LaHashem Elokeinu, those mysteries are concealed from the human being, and they are for God and God alone to understand. But whereas we cannot understand the whys, what I'd like to do with you this morning is explore what is evil and what is the origin and the root of that evil. And what does our Torah tell us about evil? And so let us begin at the very beginning. In the 6 days of creation, there are several words used to connote the idea of creation. Those words are bara, asa, yatzar, motzi. But whereas each of these words describe creation, the creative process, all of them but one are describing creation that our rabbis refer to as yesh miyesh, something from something. We have an element, we reform, recombine, and create a new combination, a compound. But only one of those words, the word bara, actually connotes the creation referred to as ex nihilo, yesh ma'ayin, something from nothing. Abracadabra, and here it appears. And there are only 3 times in the 6 days of creation that word bara is used. The first time, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, when God created the first particle, the first atom, if you will, the Big Bang, perhaps, the first creation of matter from absolutely nothing. The second time the word bara is used was on the 5th day of creation, where the Torah tells us, Vayivra Elokim et hataninim hagedolim ve'et kol nefesh hachaya, where God creates yesh me'ayin, from nothing, animal life, nefesh. The third time the word bara is used is on the 6th day, when God creates the human being. Vayivra Elokim et ha'adam b'tzalmo b'tzelem Elokim bara'ato, etc. Where God creates human life, the neshama of man. So 3 times only, when that word bara, yesh me'ayin, creation from nothing, brand new creation, is used. They each make sense, except that the second usage on the 5th day for animal life, that pasuk, that verse, is most perplexing and difficult. And the reason it is so difficult is firstly because, unlike in any of the other creations, God specifies a particular species. Vayivra Elokim et hataninim ve'et kol nefesh hachaya. All God needed to tell us is that he created animal life, kol nefesh hachaya. Why single out a particular creation, the taninim? What are they? Who are they? And why are they being linked directly to God? Vayivra Elokim et hataninim. Secondly, that word taninim, as Rashi points out, is written with chaser yud. It is missing the yud before the mem, which would indicate that it is plural. And it is written instead taninam without a yud, which confuses us as to whether or not this creature was plural, male and female, as all of the other animals were created, or whether it is singular because it is missing the yud before the mem. Thirdly, in this creation, unlike almost all of the other creations, the Torah does not attest to its creation by telling us after God's declaration, "Vayihi chen," and it was so. It continued to endure. So what are these taninim? Why are they singled out as a species in and of themselves, linked directly to God's creation, yesh me'ayin? Secondly, where is the yud? Are they plural? Is it a male and female? Is it not? And thirdly, why does the Torah not tell us, "Vayihi chen," and it was so, it endured? Rashi quotes the Gemara in Baba Basra, and Rashi tells us, first, in a simple understanding, these were huge sea monsters, huge aquatic or marine animals. But then he goes on to explain, and he tells us that the Medrash brought in the Gemara tells us that this, in fact, these taninim were what Chazal referred to as the Leviathan, or the Leviathan, the Leviathan. Says Rashi, quoting the Gemara, that this Leviathan was so massive that if God were allowed it to multiply, to propagate, it would literally destroy the world. So what did God do? He took the female, killed her, salted her to preserve her for the world to come. Where in the future, tzaddikim, the righteous, will have a major seudah, a feast, and enjoy the flesh of the Leviathan. Fish, a milk, Parva. What is going on? What just happened? Of course, this explains why taninim is written in plural and yet it's missing its yud because there is no female. We understand now why it doesn't say vayihi chen, because it didn't endure as a male and female Leviathan. The female has been killed and put away. But why still is God linking his name to its creation? What is this Leviathan? Rashi's answer generates almost more questions than it answers. Because what is this Leviathan? And if in fact it was so destructive that were it to multiply, it would destroy the world, then why did God create it to begin with? What is it? In order to answer that question, let us move on to another time where tanin is found in the Chumash. So if we turn to Sefer Shemot, the book of Exodus, we see that Paro is sitting on his throne, and Moshe, as per the instruction of God, comes to Paro and utters the famous slogan of "Let my people go." Shlach et ami. God, Yud Kei Vav Kei, he said, appeared to me, Kol Amar Hashem, and he has told me that it is time for the Jewish people to be liberated. Let my people go. And God tells Moshe, I know Pharaoh's not going to listen. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to take Aaron's staff and tell Aaron to take his staff, throw it to the floor, on the floor, that staff will turn into a tanin. And that's one of three tricks, three wonders that God gives Moshe as a way of substantiating that, in fact, there is a God who spoke to Moshe. Why? What is this all about? Fascinatingly, this wonder, this miracle, is very similar to another wonder that takes place a little earlier in the book of Exodus. After 7 days of Moshe arguing with God, refusing the mission to lead the Jewish people, finally Moshe conceived. And while doing so, God says to him, okay, Moshe, I will send Aaron to help you. And I'm going to give you tricks in a bag. I'm going to give you a few wonders to do in front of the Jewish people to prove to them that you are indeed a Navi Emet, that you are a true prophet. Because Moshe said to God, I'm going to go to these people, I'm going to tell them the Lord spoke to me, right? And what are they going to say to me? They're going to look at me and say, you're a foreigner, you're a stranger, are you out of your mind? You're yet another false prophet. We've had 1 million Shabtai tzvis in the past 210 years. Who are you? So how are you going to prove it? So God gives Moshe tricks. And of course, the first trick is throw your staff down to the floor. It's going to turn into a snake. You'll grab the tail of the snake, pick it back up, and it's going to turn back into your staff. These two wonders, this one that Moshe had been instructed to perform in front of the Jewish people, and the one that I had cited earlier, where Moshe is going to use this wonder in front of Paro, are both very similar. A staff cast to the ground, turning into a snake, a tanin. The Sforno points out two striking differences between these two wonders. He says, when Moshe is commanded to throw the staff down in front of the Jewish people, that wonder is referred to as an ot, aleph, vav, taf, a sign. And in that miracle, the staff, the Torah tells us, turns into a nachash, a snake. In that wonder, God had two messages. In Ot explains the Sforno, is a miracle, a wonder that is performed to prove the Shaliach, the messenger, that Moshe was in fact an authentic prophet, that he had in fact heard the messages he claims to have heard from God directly. And it turned into a nachash because that was a subtle message to Moshe. You questioned if Bnei Yisrael were actually going to believe you. That's a little Lashon Hara. And therefore was turned into a snake. However, says the Sforno, the miracle performed in front of Paro is referred to as a mofet. A mofet is not to prove the messenger. A mofet is to prove the existence, the veracity, and the power of God, he who sends the messenger. And there it turns into a tanin. But once again, why a tanin? And what is a tanin? So we need one final piece of evidence. The Haftorah, for Parshat Va'era, where this mofet was done, this sign, this wonder, this miracle was performed in front of Paro. Parshat Va'era, the Haftorah chosen by a rabbi, is from Sefer Yechezkel. And in it, God says the following to Paro. Ani alecha, Paro melech Mitzrayim, harovetz b'toch ye'orav, v'omer, ani ye'ori, v'ani asitani. Says Yechezkel in God's name. Hashem says, I'm on you. I'm above you, Paro. Hatanin Hagadol, the famous, the all-powerful Tanin. Harovetz al Yorav, that swarms on his Yaor, claiming that I am the Nile, and I have self-created. I have created myself. I am God. Says Hashem, I'm above you. I own you. Ani alecha. And so I'd like to suggest the Tanin is a conception, a conceptual embodiment of evil. The Torah is telling us from creation that God himself created the possibility of evil. Evil does not exist beyond or outside of the realm of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are not Zoroastrians who believed in the God of good, of light, and the God of evil, of darkness. Because how could the one good God allow evil? We don't know why, and we don't understand why. But we know, and God tells us, by Yivra Elohim et Hatanim, destructive forces were created by God. He created them. He owns them. He has eyes on them. Sometimes, for whatever reason, evil has to exist. Suffering and pain exist. And that is in the parameter of the Bria of God and God alone. And that is why God tells us, by Yivra Yesh Ma'ayin Elohim et Tanidim Hagdolim. That staff of Moshe, or actually of Aharon, turned into a tanin in front of Paro. Because the message to Paro is, you think you are the God, you are all powerful, that you are the one that is creating this evil? Yes, you have chosen evil. And God chooses his instruments with people that decide on their own to do evil. God uses them as his instruments because they have made that decision. But that God is above you. God has allowed you to exert your power. And when God says enough, tell Shakai, die, it will end there. You don't reign in a separate realm above and beyond Yud-Ke Vav-Ke Hashem. And that is why in front of Paro, it is called the Mofet, and it turns into a Tanin. In Barchi Nafshi, which we say and we will say on Tuesday every Rosh Chodesh, say it also Friday nights. In Barchi Nafshi, where David HaMelech is describing the magnificence of creation, the beauty and pulchritude of all that God has created. God says what? He says, Livyatan Zeh, this Leviathan is L'sachek. God creates to play with. Because the Leviathan, the Tanim, is God's instrument, it's his toy. He uses it to carry out what he deems necessary. Let's get back now to that Gemara in Baba Basra. Says the Gemara in Baba Basra, God preserved the female because one day in the future, all that looks like evil and all the pain and the suffering that we endure, one day we will understand. And the same way some of the evil was preserved for the next world, the same Gemara and Rashi tells us that light was preserved for the next world. By Yavdel Elohim et Habor, God put the most bright luminescent flame away for the next world as well. And that light will give us the understanding, the insight, to have the perspective, to understand that that evil was told, that at the end of the day, it was for the benefit of each of us as individuals and as Am Yisrael. And so I conclude with the bracha that we make together when we finish our last meal in the sukkah. And we walk away and we make a beautiful Yehi Ratzon And we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yehi Ratzon L'fanecha, Hashem Elokeinu V'Elokei Avotzeinu, Kishem, just as we have sat in the sukkah and performed this mitzvah, so too HaKadosh Baruch Hu, let us merit to sit next year together in the Sukkah Shel Leviathan. The Sukkah, we will feast from the fish of the Leviathan, understanding once and for all why all this evil was necessary, and understanding HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it was all l'tov, it was all for our good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that beautiful presentation. I know you are all sitting here and you listen very attentively, but you're also very hungry. Not very hungry, I hope, but you have enough outside. Please go outside and help yourself to the cake and coffee and fruit and enjoy stuff. And thank you for coming. And in Yitz Hashem, next year, we hope to replicate the same thing in Yitz Hashem. Thank you for coming.